Friends and viewers, Rip Van Winkle, a very famous folk tale. It is written by Washington Irving. Washington Irving is a famous writer who had written another famous novel, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So this is the story of Rip Van Winkle. In this story, in an introduction, explained that this tale was found among the paper of a man named Dietrich Nix Bucher, a historian of Dutch settlers of New York. Knickerbocker, however, was less interested in getting his history from books than from other people's story. The narrator insists that Knickerbocker's greatest attribute was his accuracy, in that the truth of story to come is assured. Rip Van Winkle lives in a small Dutch village along with the Hudson River in the shadow of the Catskill Mountain. So Rip is good-natured man, though inclined to avoid work. His wife considers him a terrible husband, yet he is beloved throughout the village. He does odd job from others and plays games with the children. He is attentive to everyone else's business but his own, which frustrates his wife constantly. His small farm is chaotic and poorly managed, and the soil produces less and less yearly. The state of his children reflects that his general disinterested is taking care of his own responsibility, and his son looks to be inheriting his father's traits. Rip's idleness is marred in both his dog Wolf and the company he keeps at the village inn, where other men sit and chat about the issues of the day without much enthusiasm. The schoolmaster Derek von Bummel reads whatever news comes their way, and the landlord of the inn, Nicholas Wieder, austere opinion through his pipe smokes exultation. One evening, Rip rests in the wilderness after squirrel hunting with his dog. He sees a stranger dressed in a old-fashioned Dutch clothes climbing the hill toward Rip and lugging in a cake on his shoulder. The stranger gestures to Rip to help, which Rip does, though stunned by man's appearances. Hearing what he believes is thunder, Rip follows the stranger through a ravine into a hollow where he sees more strange-looking men dressed in a similarly outdated clothing, joyously playing a kind of bowling called nine pins. They remind Rip of a painting of an old Flemish man belonging to the village person. The sound that Rip believed to be thunder turned out to be the sound of balls being rolled toward pins. The players stopped playing at his approach and filled their cups with liquor from the keg. They drank and returned to their game, even as Rip is awed and unnerved by their appearances. Eventually, Rip tries the liquor and finds it to his liking. After more than a few drinks, he falls asleep. Upon waking, Rip finds himself where he first saw the man with the kick. He worries that he has slept there all night and anticipates a scolding from his wife. He noticed that his well-loved gun is gone, and its place are the rusted, ruined pieces of what was once a rifle. Unable to call his dog to him, he is determined to revisit the scene of the previous evening encounter. Stiff upon rising, he wanders through the woods again, but the way is blocked and he can't find the hollow. Unhappy about losing his dog and the prospect of seeing his wife again, he heads home. Arriving back in his village, he notes that the people are wearing a different style of clothing than he used to, and those who acknowledge him all seem to stroke their chins. Stroking his own, Rip finds a foot long grey a big grey beard. As he moves through the village, he finds it altered, bigger, more populated, full of children he doesn't know and names he doesn't recognize over doors and on businesses. He begins to fear that the drink has confused him to the extent that he can't recognize his own village or is somehow in a different village. Making his way to his house, he finds it in ruins with a strange dog skulking around that growls at him. The house is empty, and it appears as though no one has lived there for quite some time. Hoping to find some remnant of familiarity, he goes to the inn, but even that is altered. It's now the Union Hotel with a flagpole replacing the large tree that stood outside the inn he frequented. The flag that flies atop the flagpole is an American flag, and the portrait on the inn of King George has been replaced with the portrait of George Washington. Instead of the group of idle men longing outside the door, there is a bustling crowd, including one man talking loudly about political concerns of which Rip understands nothing. Rip's strange appearance and unfamiliarity draw attention from the crowd as they inquire about which side he voted for in the election. Rip has no idea what anyone is talking about. One man, seeing Rip's old rifle, accuses Rip of planning to stir up trouble. When Rip, flustered, cries that he is just a simple man, an inhabitant of the village and loyal to the king, there is an uproar that takes some time to settle down. When Rip finally asks after his friend at the tavern, he is told of their fates. No, two dead, one in the Congress. It is also revealed that Nicholas Veeder has been dead for 18 years, indicating Rip has been gone for at least that long. Dismayed, Rip asks if anyone knows Rip Van Winkle. A few in the crowd point out a young man as Rip considered him. He realizes that his young man looks just like him at the age he fell asleep. Someone asks what his name is, and he is at a loss, confused by this twin version of himself, his age and the changed world around him. At this, the crowd begins to believe that this old man has lost his wits before a young woman is heard shushing her baby, whose name is apparently Rip. When asked her name and her father's name, it is revealed that she is Rip's daughter, and she explained that he disappeared 20 years ago and hasn't been seen since. When asked, she tells Rip that Dame Von Winkle recently died. Rip exclaimed that he is her father and then looks around to ask if anyone remembers him. An elderly woman recognized him by name and asked about his prolonged absence. As Rip tells his story, the crowd is skeptical. The village, however, agrees to let Peter Vandersdonk decide whether or not that story is reasonable. Wenderdonk is oldest person in the village and knows the history of the area as well as the folklore. He described the surrounding mountain as being inhabited by strange creatures. He also claimed that Hendrik Henry Hudson and his crew, legendary explorer of the area, come back every 20 years to visit and make sure that land is still in good order. In fact, Vanderdonk's father had once seen them dressed in their old-fashioned clothing, playing ninepins. Vanderdonk himself says that he once heard the thundering of their bowling balls one summer afternoon. This wise testimony seemed to validate Rip's story in the eyes of the townspeople. Rip moves in with his daughter and her husband, whom Rip recognized as one of the children he used to play with in his youth. He resumes his ideal ways, now old enough to do so without criticism. He takes walks and sits outside the hotel, telling stories about time before the war and learning more about how the world has changed in his absence. Soon everyone in town knows the tale by heart. A note appended to the end of story comes from the Knickerbocker, insisting that every word of the story is true. He has spoken to Rip Van Winkle himself and seen a document verifying the veracity of the story. So the reader has no reason whatsoever to doubt it. A postscript is included, supposedly from notes made by Knickerbocker about the indigenous folklore of the region concerning both the spirit that manifests the weather and those that live in the Catskill Mountain. So this is the story of the Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving. And I hope you will enjoy this story. This how Rip Van Winkle had taken the drink from the strange people's hand, and how he slept for 20 years, when after 20 years he came back to his village. Nobody had recognized him, even his wife and the other people. So this strange story is written by Washington Irving, Rip Van Winkle. Thank you very much.